So that's what a celebrity scientist is.
You've been applauded before in your moments.
So let's, if you don't mind, because this is your first book, a revisiting of your first book, let's talk a little bit about you. When did you first realize you were absolutely fascinated by science? Do you remember that moment?
Oh, yeah. It was a family visit to my local planetarium.
This is where?
The Hayden Planetarium. Speaking as a native New Yorker, and surely there are more than 6 others of you who are native to the city here on the Upper West Side. But I was 9 years old, and I grew up in the Bronx. We come to and so, you sit in the theater and the lights dim and the stars come out, and there were like countless stars on the dome. And I was starstruck by it. In fact, I thought it was a hoax because I had seen the stars from the Bronx, and there's only 8 of them or something. And so I was a wonderful hoax, but it was a hoax nonetheless.
And 3 of them are airplanes.
Right. And so it would be a couple of years before I would realize, oh my gosh, there are that many stars in the actual night sky, and you can actually make a career of this as an astrophysicist. So beginning at age 11, had you asked me that annoying question that adults always ask kids, which is, want to be when you grow up, I would say astrophysicist. And that would cut the conversation short real quick. If you say, I'm going to be a doctor, lawyer, oh, Aunt Matilda's a doctor, Uncle Joe's they didn't know anybody who's an astrophysicist. So it's a pretty short conversation, but it started then. And I didn't realize until college that most people don't know what they want to do with their life, even through college. They go alphabetically through and so...
So just to, this continued in college, because it's one thing to think you want to do it when you're 11. It's another to take, multivariate calculus, linear algebra, okay, I still want to do it.
No, it was the opposite of that, actually. It was, the universe is so immense, and what attracted me to it was how much we didn't yet know. Just the abject ignorance on the frontier, which is true for any branch of science, but in most branches of science, that edge of ignorance is not so manifest as it is staring out in the open night sky. And so I said to myself, I want to make discoveries in this space. So the math, once you realize that math is the language of the universe, it didn't matter how hard the math was, because I wanted to commune with the cosmos. And so, yeah, I was good at some branches of math, others I struggled some more. Can I tell you a fast calculus story? Yes, calculus has stories.
By definition.
It'll be fast. I'm in high school, and I'm taking calculus. And just so you know, calculus is not just some next step after algebra. It's got squiggly lines you've never seen in your life representing mathematical functions. And so I look at the book, and in the open page, there are these equations in the front and in the back. There's just pages of equations, and I'm looking at them, and I don't know, I can't figure anything out. I don't know anything. There's half the Greek alphabet and other squiggly lines, and I said, I will never understand this. I remembered thinking. And then I said, but I want to commune with the cosmos. So I must. And so I slogged through it, and week after week went by. And after each week, this fog between me and the equations began to dissipate. And I would say, Hey, I need that equation to solve that. Hey, give me that. Oh, there's another one here. And slowly, the transparency of these equations became clear to me. And now I'm like master of them, coming from a time when I thought it was completely intractable. And that became a lesson to me for the rest of my life, where if there was a goal I had in mind, and there was a barrier that I felt was insurmountable, and I knew other people had surmounted it, I said, is that other person human and not alien? I'm human, I will surmount it as well.
So what was the family reaction, your parents' reaction at the time? Because, I suspect that you are not surprised at how good a scientist you are. But I'm going to guess you are surprised at how good a living you are able to make being a good scientist. And I'm guessing your parents might have worried that, why doesn't he want to be a lawyer or a doctor and make a good living?
I know this sounds corny, but my parents just wanted us to be happy. No, I didn't mean to get that react, but yeah, as long as we were happy and focused and not doing drugs or gangs or whatever else, which were some of the forces operating at the time, they were happy, and neither of them were scientists, so I couldn't run home to them, help me with the math or the physics or the calculus. My brother, so I attended the Bronx High School of Science. My brother attended the High School of Music and Art. By the way, he illustrated the book, okay? So we've got a double situation here. My sister was the sellout. She went into business afterwards. So no, it was not, that was never an issue about sort of career, and I think they knew that if we were happy, whatever kind of living we would make, we'd be happy doing it, and that.
So then, you're a grad student, and while you were a grad student, you write the first version of this book. Now, I got a PhD, I was in grad school. I think people who knew me then would say I had a healthy ego. I did not think of writing a book explaining the universe when I was in grad school. So, what the hell is going on?
Okay, so that's a really good question.
Why aren't you focused on your dissertation?
I know, that's what my thesis advisor kept asking of me as well. I would ultimately end up transferring graduate schools, in part because there was a mismatch of perception of focus and intensity and seriousness about the research. So this was written while I was in graduate school at the University of Texas, where I met my wife, who got her PhD in mathematical physics there. I would then transfer my graduate program to Columbia University right here. We got more folks. I think we have someone from everywhere in this audience. From Tougaloo Tech. Okay, no. So ultimately I would transfer, because they were not believing that I was as serious as I was. But there's a monthly newsletter. The name of the observatory of the University of Texas, McDonald Observatory, had nothing to do with hamburgers, but there was a newsletter that had a column. And I said I could write that column. There's a question and answer column. And I was pretty socialized, as best as I can judge. I'm not on the autism spectrum, so this was a thing that I could embrace and get paid. I was paid $25 per question answer pair. And that was working for me, all right, at the time. And then after several years of this, oh, by the way, so the column was just called Merlin's Words to the Wise, but when I took it over, there was no character Merlin. It was just the title of it. And people said, well, let me look that up, and I checked this, and no, it's called Merlin's, to do something with the character. So when I took over the column, I developed an entire backstory for this character, Merlin. And this Merlin character is born in the Andromeda Galaxy 4.5 billion years ago, coincident with the birth of the solar system and Earth. So that coincidence got Merlin interested in what was going on with life forms on this planet. And so this Merlin has been around for all of time. And so when people ask, "Dear Merlin, I don't quite understand gravity," then Merlin would recall a conversation with Isaac Newton and have Isaac Newton bring the answer to that question. And I delighted in this because I care a lot about history and the history of science and how we came to understand things and what the different character personalities were. And so in doing so, I would research how would Newton have spoken at the time. And I had all of these famous characters as friends of Merlin, right? So this is so that's the fictional dimension of this, just to be an excuse, a vehicle, a vessel to bring actual science to the public. And so this was basically, I did it on the side while in graduate school. And after several years of that, I said, hey, I got like a whole book's worth of content here. And then I showed it to my brother, and he sketched a couple, because Merlin has a quirky kind of personality. There's always a quirky phrase or a sentence in almost every answer. Just something quirky. Just something. And my brother would cue onto that. His name is Stephen Tyson. And he would illustrate it with some cartoon. And so they go together in this. And so it was my very first book, published by Columbia University Press, because I transferred to Columbia by then. And so I realized that 35 years ago, it was time to resurrect this character, bring him Merlin has no gender, actually, this Merlin. There's more than one Joe in the world. There's another Merlin, not the Arthurian Merlin. So this Merlin brought into not only the 21st century, but to the 2020s with the content made current. And also, I think I'm a better writer today than I was then, but I honed a lot of my methods, tools, and tactics of reaching the public while I was writing that column. Because people would ask things, and I would see what was driving your curiosity. And I'd come back with something that would massage that curiosity and make you even more curious, or fan that ember that hasn't really burned since you were a kid, when you were arrested by curiosity. You just couldn't, that's a time that we've lost as adults. And some adults still have that ember that can be fanned. And so I see my job as an educator, not to face the chalkboard or whatever they're made of today and lecture, but to find out what can, will, and does excite you about the universe and feed that. And that's what Merlin attempts to do.
So talk to me a little bit about what you were, I think, hinting at in terms of the change in graduate schools. Because it seems to me it gets to a very important issue in science, which is you have chosen a path where your interests, your expertise, your avocation are all the kind of vast breadth of science. Yes, it is astrophysics, but it even goes beyond that, and it's all of astrophysics. If you were to have said, I want to get tenure in the astrophysics department of a major research university, you would have had to go very deep into one specific
narrow
thing.
Yes.
Was that an issue of temperament for you? Was it did you consciously make that decision? Did you just go with what you enjoyed doing?
It's where I'd rather be now. I'm here because I've been called to do so. And what I mean by that is, let's go back in time, 1995, where we know we're going to rebuild the Hayden Planetarium. I'm brought in basically as an advisor at first, but then they made me director. And so what happens in 1995, we discovered the first exoplanet, first planet orbiting another star. It was banner headlines. Now we're rising through 6,000. It doesn't make headlines anymore. But in 1995, 30 years ago, it was banner headlines. So NBC sent up one of their action cams and to interview me, not because they knew me from anything, but I had title, director of the Hayden Planetarium. because that's what they cared about. So they said, well, how do we make this discovery? And I gave my best professorial reply. I said, well, you can't see the planet itself, it's too dark, but you can see the star, and a star and a planet are such that the planet is not in orbit around the star. Both the planet and the star orbit a common center of gravity, which means the star is moving in response to the planet. You can measure the Doppler shift of the planet's light in much the same way a police radar gun can get your speed. It's a Doppler shift of your car. So, and then you can get the speed of the star moving in response to the planet and infer the presence of the planet, and you have it. Okay. I gave this whole long explanation. And then I did this. It was, as I'm describing the process, and I said, once you invoke the Doppler shift, because it's not that the planet goes around the star, they both go around their common center of mass. So I do this, okay? And that was in the afternoon. It was to air that evening, 1995. I get home, I called everybody. Say, I'm gonna be on TV, check it out, okay? Okay? I turn on the news that night, and the only thing they show is me doing this, okay? So, I said, oh, okay. They don't want my professorial reply. Even though they came to my place, they want something that works in their place. And that's when I said to myself, I want to be better at that. I wanted to be a match between what I give them and what they air, as an example. So I practiced sound bites at that point. Okay, I had my wife sort of shout out different objects, phenomenon in the universe, and I'd stare in a mirror and I'd give 3 sentences on it. Okay, so mention anything in the whole universe. I could be anything at all. Go, and I'll give you the anatomy of a soundbite. Go.
Black holes.
Avoid them. Sorry.
I don't know that NBC would have aired.
A region of space where the gravity is so intense, light cannot escape. So try to stay on the outside rather than go inside. Something like that. So I got better at that. And so as subsequent interviews started to come, and I'd hand them that, other outlets would see that, and so more news outlets would come, and then documentarians would come. And so I became this not because I sought it out, but because the system of public curiosity requested it of me.
But did at some point you say to yourself, was there a fantasy you had that you were going to write some big work of academic?
I still have that, however delusional it is.
Yeah.
I have an idea. I'm imagining that in a few years there are enough other people doing science things on the internet, on social media, that I can just tiptoe backward and go out the back door and go back to the lab and no one will notice. Don't say no to that. Because I still have some ideas I'd like to pursue, but I can say with humble honesty that whatever discoveries remain within me to make, they're probably not as useful to the world as continuing to bring science to the public. And so I've accepted that fact. And the day the public says, no, we're done with you, we want to, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to go home and cry. I'm going to go back to the lab where you'll never see me again.
One of the fascinating parts of the book is that Merlin meets a lot of great scientists along the way. Leonardo, Einstein, Newton.
I give a fast one about Leonardo. So It's fast. I want you to appreciate the research that went into this. So someone asks about when there's a crescent moon, as there was a couple of nights ago, juxtaposed next to a very bright star. It was not a plane. It was not a star. It was the planet Venus, okay, in the evening sky. If you look very carefully at the crescent moon, you can see the rest of the moon in view. But the sun is not directly illuminating that, so how is it visible? Leonardo came up with the first explanation of that. If you're on that darkened part of the moon and looking in the sky, Earth is full. You're looking at full Earth in the lunar sky. And so sunlight bounces off of full Earth, goes up to the unlit side of the moon, and comes back to Earth with enough light for you to see the outline of the rest of it. He first figured that out. Someone asked about that in the book. So rather than just answer it, I said, let's let Leonardo do it. So I said, Merlin caught up with Leonardo at a cafe in a piazza in Florence, okay? He was slurping a bowl of minestrone soup and then gives the answer. Now you're probably saying, well, that's very stereotype of minestrone. Well, it's rumored that was, in fact, his favorite soup. So if you ever had the occasion to dig up on this man's life, you will find out how much research actually went into that answer. That's all I'm telling you. Yeah.
It actually does relate to the question I was going to ask, which is not about minestrone. When you think about these people, and Leonardo is so unbelievable because you think to yourself, with what was known at the time, with the instruments at the time, how did this man come up with these things, insight after insight? Who do you think is the most extraordinary scientific mind that that humanity has produced?
There is no contest. Isaac Newton. Nobody comes close.
Explain why.
Okay. So, okay. He, working alone, discovers the laws of motion. Then he discovers the law of gravity, universal law of gravitation. Oh, and then someone asked, Ike, or I don't know what they call him, Ike, why do your planets orbit in this shape, ellipses, ovals, rather than perfect circle? They said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And he goes home, and he comes back, I finally have my answer. And they said, well, Isaac, how did you do that? Well, I had to invent integral and differential calculus to answer that question. He then discovers the laws of optics, deducing that white light is composed of colors, because you could take those same colors, recombine them, and get white light, which freaked out artists of the day. He does all of this. Then he turns 26. You tell me. Okay? And in one of his books called Optics, he has a section in the back called Queries. I love that. And in my podcast, we have a variant of the podcast called Cosmic Queries. And I'm inspired by Isaac Newton in this regard. It's just called Queries. And these are questions just spilled off his plate. Crumbs that he didn't have time to answer. He never got around to it. Just some questions. Let me just tack them onto the back of the book. One of them is, I wonder if the stars of the night sky are just like our sun, but just much, much farther away. I'm saying when you see someone, because great scientists are marked not by their answers, but by how great their questions are. Because not all questions are made equal. Here's a question. At what temperature does the number 7 melt? That's a completely meaningless question. even though the nouns and verbs are in the right order and it has a question mark. Imagine how many people have asked those kinds of questions before and spent their whole life trying to answer them. We haven't heard of any of them because they were barking up the wrong tree. Because unlike in the arts, where your creativity can be put to page, and let's take Van Gogh's Starry Night, for example. If Van Gogh didn't paint that, no one ever for the rest of the history of the world will ever paint that. If Beethoven didn't write his Ninth Symphony, no one else is ever going to write it. They're unique expressions of unique individual creativity. Okay. Whereas in science, it's nature that's the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner of an idea. So Newton was brilliant, and he did all that alone before he was 26. Somebody would have come up with the same thing, or some combination of people. So the rules are a little different in this regard. So another question that would make no sense is, what kind of cheese is the moon made out of? Let's assume that was your big question. You would design experiments to fly to the moon to check, is it camembert, is it blue cheese, and you're just wasting everybody's time, but you don't know it at the time. His questions, I'm looking at it 200 years in the future of those questions. I say, this man is on every single question. And he has this astonishing quote. I will mangle it only a little bit. He says, sometimes I feel as a child on the ocean shore picking up one pebble over another because it's shinier. Yet the great ocean of undiscovered truths lay before me. That's Isaac Newton. Humbled by what he knew he didn't yet know, yet what he figured out transformed us all. And I got in big trouble one time. This 12 years ago, something like this. Okay? December 25th, I tweet, on this day, long ago, a child was born who by the age of 30 would transform civilization. Happy birthday, Isaac Newton. Born 1642. Boy, that pissed off a lot of people. Christians, it would have pissed off, not the Jews, of course. Isaac Newton was born Christmas Day, 1642. But there's a technicality. Remember, that's England, and England was the Anglican Church, and they didn't care what the Pope said. By then, the Pope had invoked the Gregorian calendar, which happened like 50 years earlier. No, 50 years earlier. So England was not going to take the Pope's calendar just because the Pope said so. But that calendar is way more accurate and corrected the locations of the dates. And so on the Gregorian calendar, he's born today, January 4th, yesterday, in 1643. So, but I slipped it in with a Julian calendar bit. But it pissed off some people. And it's odd because Isaac Newton was actually born, on that calendar, he was actually born on that date. When no one knows what day Jesus was born, right? So people are angry with me for saying something true. It's tough out there, let me tell you. I don't know. The cesspool of social media, yeah.
So let me ask you about this.
Oh yeah, and so Newton. So I'm just saying. So Merlin has a conversation with Isaac Newton about the apple. Does it hit him in the head or not? And so there's a whole. So my brother drew Isaac here, but with the apple actually hitting him in the head. It's pretty funny. But anyhow, that story is in here. Did the apple hit Isaac Newton in the head?
So you talked about how science is different, because you're right, it's more an act of discovery
Yes.
of laws of nature rather than sheer invention. When you think about that, do you think that Albert Einstein, who became so the symbol of kind of scientific genius. Would Einstein's theory of relativity and the things for which he became famous have happened anyway? Because around Einstein, as you know, there were people like Niels Bohr, and there was a whole cadre of German, mostly Jewish scientists who were working on many of these things. Is it fair to say that actually, Newton, in your words, is somewhat underrated? Einstein is a bit overrated as a singular genius?
Yeah, so Einstein comes next after Newton, and this just in. Yes, okay. Einstein, I would say, comes next. So if you know a little bit of the history of relativity, 1905, he discovers the special theory of relativity, which is basically the modern theory of motion. Its analog to Isaac Newton would be Isaac Newton's laws of motion, okay? They correspond with each other. 10 years later, he comes up with a general theory of relativity, which is the modern understanding of gravity. That was a singular expression of genius. Whereas the special relativity, people were orbiting those ideas. Within 5 years, I think it would have been completely figured out. General relativity, I'm saying 50 years. I'm giving it 50 on the outset, maybe 30. And that's with everybody else still wondering what to do and how to do it. There are GPS satellites today that orbit well above low Earth orbit. They're like middle Earth orbit. There's LEO, low Earth orbit, middle Earth orbit, MEO, and then GEO, geosynchronous. So there's this middle range. They're relatively far from Earth's surface. The strength of Earth's gravity is much lower there. The rate of time ticks differently. We know this from Einstein's general theory of relativity. But let's say he never came up with the relativity, but we did invent GPS satellites. We'd put the satellites there and we say, wait a minute, these satellites are gaining time relative to our clocks here on Earth. We have no idea why. Let's just measure it and correct for it and get on with our lives. But with Einstein, we know exactly how much time it's going to gain. So your time that's so precise that we all agree to, that is pre-corrected because of Einstein's general theory of relativity. And one thing I lament, in heist movies, gone is the scene, let's synchronize watches. That was an important scene in heist movies. They don't exist anymore because your smartphone gets its time from satellites, and they all agree. So I would say 30 to 50 years. That was a singular act of genius. So I would say if Newton were around in Einstein's time, Newton would have done it all. If Einstein were around in Newton's time, not so much.
All right, before we go to the audience questions, one last one for you. In the next 50 or 75 years, do you think it is conceivable that we will be able to establish enough self-sustaining colonies on Mars to make it a worthwhile expenditure of massive amounts of money to explore that possibility?
No. Next question. No. Elon Musk's enthusiasm for Mars notwithstanding, in 1969, when we landed on the moon, there were all these articles that came out. Old-timers will remember Life magazine, Look magazine, talking about the future. They said, we're on the moon in 1969, we'll have colonies on Mars by 1985. You realize we have not left low Earth orbit since 1972, 52 years ago. And you're asking me in 50 years whether we're going to have colonies on Mars? You're asking that because it looks like that's just the next thing to happen. However, that's not why we ever went anywhere in space. We went into space because we felt threatened by the godless communists. And we were reacting to everything they did in space. They put up Sputnik. We freaked out. We founded NASA. They put up a dog. we put up a chimp, we put up a thing, and this kept going. And then we got to the moon, we looked over our shoulder, wait, where are the Russians? Oh, they're not here, okay, then we ended the space program. We had Apollo 18 ready to fly, we never flew it. Because the Russians said, we ain't following you to the moon. Y'all's crazy, okay? So, but we're going back to the moon now. Project Artemis. Artemis, NASA was early woke here. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo in Greek legend. That's pretty early woke for NASA. And NASA's going back to the moon? Well, why are they going now? Why didn't they stay on the moon in 1972 or go back in 1980 or 1990 or 2000 or 2010? Why? Oh, China says they want to put astronauts on the moon. And all of a sudden, hey, wouldn't it be good if we went back to the moon? Yeah, sure, let's do that. And Trump announces this, and it smoothly goes into the Biden administration, and it's going to continue back. And that's something that transcends all politics because we are spooked by other folks who might get to someplace before us and plant a flag. And by the way, you know what? You didn't ask this, but I'm going to tell you. All our flags are either down or faded beyond recognition on the moon. China is making a flag with threads made from the rock called basalt. They're making threads out of rock. So that when they deploy their flag, it will be good for 1 billion years, as long as the rocks are good. So,
and it'll cost $5.
So I comment, I think you appreciate this. I was on CNN, that's your people there, right? And I'm commenting that we've been reactive, and we're being reactive to China, and we're doing it because China is doing it. That let's not fool ourselves. We have no document that says we're doing this but that's the timing of it, okay? It's always been the timing of it. After that, I got name-checked by Marco Rubio in Florida, and he commented on my comments on CNN, he said, and he accused me of being a shill for China. Then I had to look up shill. I forgot what shill means. And then I thought, do I follow him into the gutters of social media? And I said, no, but I do have what's a forbidden Twitter file. These are tweets I've never posted. Just like that Christmas Day tweet should have stayed in the forbidden Twitter file. So what I was going to post was, yep, black men from the Bronx make excellent Chinese spies. We're just the ripe person you want for that kind of spy work. Anyway, I forgot what question you asked me. What was it?
Don't worry. I'm going to now go to the audience.
Oh, please,
questions.
yes, audience, yes.
I've told my kids that when they look at the stars, many of them may not actually exist anymore, considering how long it has taken their light to reach us. Am I correct?
That's a romantic concept. You're mostly wrong. Okay, by analogy, okay, you are 5 feet from me. Light travels 1 foot per nanosecond, per billionth of a second. So I see you not as you are, but as you once were 5 billionths of a second ago. But you live 90, maybe 100 years. So those 5 billionths of a second ago, I should not distract myself about whether you're still alive. So when you look up at the night sky and you see stars, a nighttime filled with stars, that light took thousands of years to get here. Yes, some may have died, but those stars live billions of years. So the time the light has been traveling to you is small compared with the life expectancy of the star.
But to be fair to the guy, theoretically it is possible.
That's what I'm saying. So, yes, and in fact, if you look at the entire universe, In any given night, in the entire universe, there are dozens of stars dying right before your eyes, and they're called supernovae. In fact, there's an Italian movie called La Corrispondenza, starring Jeremy Irons, and he plays an astrophysicist, and he has a love interest, and he gets some disease, he doesn't tell her about it, he dies from it, but he preloads the mail with letters from him to arrive months at a time long after he's dead, so that he remains alive in her love for him. Just like starlight, from a star that may have long ago died, yet for you, it still lives.
Who knew astrophysicists were so romantic? So you know that, I'm sure this happens to you everywhere, but I do think it's worth asking Lisa's question. What is the deal with Pluto? Is it...
Get over it.
Is it
Next
just,
question.
Is it just hanging out in space?
Okay. Some of you may know I am implicated in the demotion of Pluto. I did not pull the trigger, but I definitely drove the getaway car on this one. Okay, when we were redoing the planetarium, and I'm overseeing the exhibits, I saw the trend lines in what was happening with Pluto, and I wanted to future-proof the exhibits. So when we opened in the year 2000, we took Pluto and put it in a different part of the exhibit floor with other dirty ice balls in the outer solar system, leaving the 8 main planets together. Someone from the New York Times noticed this and wrote a page 1 story below the fold. If there's anyone younger than 30, could an older person explain to them what below the fold means in the room? Because they will have no idea what that means. Okay. There was a headline that said, "Pluto not a planet? Only in New York." And that's when hate mail started flowing into my office from pissed off 3rd graders who had just memorized the 9 planets, and now there's only 8 of them. So I have a file cabinet of angry letters. Okay. Pluto had it coming, first of all. Thank you if someone knows. So Pluto, most Pluto lovers I've met do not know the following 3 facts. 1, our moon has 5 times the mass of Pluto. 2, more than half of Pluto's volume is made of ice. So that if Pluto were where Earth is right now, heat from the sun would evaporate that ice and it would grow a tail, which is no kind of behavior for a planet. 3rd, Pluto has an orbit that is so elongated that it crosses the orbit of another planet. Excuse me, no. So we finally set up a set of rules and regulations such that Pluto is kicked out of the Planet Club. It's still a dwarf planet, but I think it's happier there. It's one of the biggest dwarf planets.
Big fish in a small pond.
Exactly.
A number of people ask variations of this question. What is the big question that you would love to see answered in your lifetime? What is the thing that you think most about?
I have a cop-out answer to that. So you're just going to have to deal with it. Because I used to ask that of myself. When in graduate school, I said, what big question did I want answered? I wanted to know what is the size of the universe. So then we would launch the Hubble telescope and we would know the size of the universe. So the question was like answered. And once it was answered, it didn't feel as big as it did when we didn't know the answer. So I thought to myself, instead of chasing what I think are the big questions, instead, I want to know what question I do not yet know to ask because it will be a question that will rise up only when we've achieved that next proscenium of answers, allowing you to see farther tomorrow than you can today. And upon doing so, I'd have a fresh set of questions undreamt of. So I lay awake at night wondering what questions I do not yet know to ask.
So, and this may relate. Everyone thinks AI is going to change everything. Do you have thoughts as to how AI will change?
Is that your question or it's what someone else asked?
No,
are you slipping that in?
Nope.
Just because you moderated, that don't mean you get a free
Jasper
question.
and Jacob S. have asked this.
Okay, fine.
How do you think AI will impact? First of all, you're not allowed to. There are rules to moderation, just as there are to planetary behavior. And you just violated one of them. But I am not going to demote you. I'm simply going to ask you, how do you think AI changes the study of astrophysics? What do you think we'll learn that we don't know? You can already see it in biology, completely transforming because of the mass computation it can do. What do you think happens in astrophysics?
We were early out of the box with what role computers can play in our professional work, in our discovery, in our data analysis, in our exploration. And so the shock that AI has brought upon our culture in recent years primarily occurred when AI crossed over from what happens typically in the physical sciences, when we've been using computers forever, to now AI can compose your term paper. And it started encroaching on the creative arts. And the creative arts are the people who write headlines and write stories, and they're the ones who are completely freaking out and say, oh my gosh, it's going to do. Meanwhile, that same demographic was not complaining when robots were taking over the assembly line jobs in Detroit. Say, well, you got to get used to that. That's natural. But take up something else. They were saying safely in their room as they were writing their next novel or their screenplay or their next storyline for TV. So now it's reaching into that, and you're hearing this resistance or fear or uprising, and I think it will settle. We'll figure out how to use it so that it's a tool rather than a replacement. Already, I don't like the TV commercials that are completely done with AI. They feel like cartoons to me. Maybe they'll get better. I don't know. I see characters who are created by AI and not real people. I think real people have real life experience that AI can never have. It could only approximate it, or it can only imitate it. If I create an AI version of me, but then I go to the beach and play with the seashells or meet someone new, that AI version of me has no idea what I just did because it only knows what's already online. So it's fundamentally limited in its creativity. So for example, you say, write me a poem in the style of Longfellow, or draw me a picture in the style of Van Gogh. It can do that, and it'll do it brilliantly. But if you say, write me a poem in the style of no one who has ever been born, I don't know what it's going to give you. I'm thinking it's going to be crap. Because we are all living real life experiences. And until AI becomes a robot and can take a vacation with me, I don't see that as the threat that people are imagining for it. So I'm cool, bring it on. And the more AI can do and figure stuff out in my job, I can do other things in my job that I know AI can't do, like think up a new law of physics.
So you've devoted your life to this idea of spreading scientific literacy, education, and I'm wondering where you think we are as a country now with...
You're telling me I suck at my job. That's what you're saying.
But really, A, how worried should we be? And B, what do you think the answer is? Because how worried, let me just say to you, for example, you have a 50% decline in Republicans who believe that vaccines are effective. 50% of 50% of the country, right? What's the, why do you think this has happened, and what do you think is the way out?
Okay, so here's how I preserve my ego at the end of the day. I say to myself, if I were not doing what I'm doing, it would be worse. That's what I don't know how. I'm trying. My first tweet, like March 12th, 2020, when it was still called the coronavirus, my first tweet was, the coronavirus is like an enemy. The coronavirus, think of it as an alien that is an enemy of our species. It doesn't care where you were born, what religion you are, what your political affiliation is, and it will require a combined, concerted effort based on the objective truths of science and not mythical, magical thinking that has pervaded this society before. Something like that. The tweet read better than that. I posted this, day 3 of the coronavirus, and it just got worse, right? And so I don't know if it would be worse if I didn't exist, but I have to tell myself that. Otherwise, why am I doing any of this? So yeah, it's a problem. So the most cynical side of me, I have 2 cynical comments. 1, with AI, there's a worry about deep fakes, right? Okay. 2 cynical sides. 1, I foresee the day where AI becomes so good at making a deep fake that the people who believed fake news as true will no longer think their fake news is true. Because they'll think their fake news was faked by AI. The day that happens, the entire role of the internet as a source of objectively true information will implode. And that will be the death of the internet as that source. Like 1992 to 2028, whatever. Rest in peace. And the internet will return to just cat videos and other. Remember when we just would entertain each other with videos? The internet will return because AI will be so good at faking news. That's my first apocalyptic prediction. Second, what was it? I forgot. It'll come to me.
Well, it better come fast because
Okay.
we're out of time.
No, go quick. We got to look at that stack of questions. I'll give soundbite answers. Go.
All right.
Go.
Did Einstein really say there are only 2 things that are infinite, the universe and human stupidity?
That's attributed to him, but I think it is in dispute. But that doesn't mean it's not true. Okay.
Why is there no up or down in space?
Up or down is reference to a source of gravity that you're experiencing. And so if in space you are falling towards some place, there is a down, it's the direction you're falling. But when you're falling, you sense weightlessness, and you think there's not an up and down, but there definitely is. It's the direction you're falling. And all the astronauts who are weightless are in free fall somewhere. So technically there is a down. Technically, yes.
And finally, is there somebody else in the universe? Is there another life form? And will we?
Is there life elsewhere in the universe? Well, let's bring that back home and ask: are the lights over New Jersey aliens? I couldn't resist. I was asked on the news. These are your people asking me this. Dr. Tyson, what do you think these are? The officials say they don't know, but they know that they're harmless. Then I say, those 2 sentences do not comport with each other. If you cannot identify what it is, you are in no position to say it's harmless, period. So they said, what, could it be aliens? And I said, As an Earthling, I can't claim to know the motives of aliens, but I'm just thinking, if they're visiting Earth, why would they be over New Jersey? I just get, no offense, I'm just saying, if you're visiting Earth from across the galaxy, think of all the places on Earth instead of northern New Jersey, that's all. So let me end with a more precise answer, okay? Life on Earth began almost as soon as it possibly could have, within 100 million years, which sounds like a long time, but that's short compared to how long life has been here. So that's A. B, the ingredients of life match one for one in order the chemical ingredients of the universe itself. Number one is hydrogen. Two is helium, but it's chemically inert. The next is oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. Then my favorite element, other, okay? So now you get to humans, it's hydrogen, oxygen. Together they make the water molecule in our body. It's more than half of our weight. Next is carbon, we're carbon-based chemistry. Next is oxygen, next is nitrogen. One for one. So life on Earth was opportunistic. And how do the same ingredients get everywhere? They get forged in the centers of stars that explode, scatter their enrichment across the galaxy into gas clouds that make the next generation of stars, enriched with those very same ingredients. So when you're out looking up at the night sky, instead of thinking how small you are, think of how large you are for having ingredients brought to you by stars that have given their lives billions of years earlier. So that it's not poetically true, it's literally true that we are stardust. And it's not just that we are alive in this universe. The universe is also alive within us. And that discovery of 20th century astrophysics borders on the spiritual, because it offers you a path of connectivity to the great unfolding of cosmic events before you. And that's just a little piece of what gets me up in the morning to start my day.
All right, I will tell people to buy the book, but they already have. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Pleasure.
Fareed, thank you.